All right, in the last video we looked at the different types of crime and thought a little bit about which kinds of crime we might think are better or worse for society or more severe. Um, in this video we want to look at a little bit of some of the social problems of crime in the United States and the question of why do people commit crimes and how can we use these theories of crime to understand these problems. Again, it's worth understanding that crime and deviance more generally are both universal and relative. Uh, there are crimes in all societies all around the world. Um, so it's universal, it's everywhere. But it's also relative. What's considered criminal in one place is not the same thing as another, and what's considered severe in one place or very deviant in one place might be not at all in another. Um, in our society, women showing their hair and their faces is considered totally normal. In other places, it's a crime punishable by death. Um, in our society, a man cheating on his wife is considered bad, but it's not a crime. But in other societies, again, it is something that you can punish by death. So what's criminal and what's deviant from place to place differs. So it's relative depending to where and really when you are. So some of the key issues around the United States in crime is that more than any other developed country, the US has higher crime rates. And how do we explain why there is more crime in the United States? Here we might look at Merton's strain theory. Another persistent issue is that there does seem to be higher crime rates in African American communities. We'll get to this more in later videos when we look at race and crime. But it is important to stop and think for a moment about the difference between actual crime and reported rates of crime. The crime rates that we have data on are simply those crimes where it was reported, someone called it into the police, and the police actually filed a report on it. And these statistics are usually gathered by the FBI. But this doesn't necessarily mean that there is more or less crime according to those. There could be all kinds of stuff going on in hidden hotel suites or in basements that we don't know about. So actual crime rates really depend on a couple things, such as where the police are. We know that police are in African American communities more. For example, that they stop and arrest black folks more. But we still do actually see some higher crime rates in black communities. And so this is going to be a question we want to dig into a bit later on. So one of the more famous American theories of crime comes from Robert Merton, um, and it's called strain theory. And the basic idea is this: if you think about any idea of success, in America, what do pop stars talk about? What TV shows do we watch of like successful people? Um, the American dream of success has a lot to do with material wealth, money, and how we get it. Um, and the interesting thing about Americans is that we're not actually that scrupulous about it, thinking about how do we get to that material success, to that house, that nice car, all those nice things we want. If you think about the hustler image in a lot of hip hop and now on television, how many shows um, have a sort of pardon the interruption. So in America, we also have lots of stories about heroic gangsters, the mafia, and all these stories glorify that success and that wealth, and we don't really have a lot to say about how they got it, which is not very legally. So for Merton, part of what he's saying with strain theory is that there's a strain that arises in our society from a very material idea of wealth and the lack of ways of getting it. And so what this produces is a couple different types that he comes up with. One is conformists, people who say, well, they just kind of accept their lot in life. They get what they can working within the system, conforming to the rules. There are rebels who try to destroy the system in some way or go against the system. They might like try to live off the grid. They might try to change the rules of society. They might be, punks and gangs and just going against those ideas of success in general. Um, and the interesting idea he has is innovators, people who find innovative ways outside of the rules to get that ultimate dream of money and success. So they might hustle on the side, they might sell drugs, they might start a organized crime racket. Um, Again, they're just being innovative and their desire to get to that American dream. So for Merton, it's this particularly material idea of success and the question of how to get it in our society that creates more criminals. Other theories that often stand out give us some different um, hypotheses about why crime is committed and why it might be so high in our country. So, labeling theory argues that people who are seen in society as deviant or as criminal are more likely, or who are labeled as criminal, are more likely to kind of become criminal. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this can start to maybe help us understand why we see higher crime rates in black communities, because particularly black men in our society are often seen as threatening, criminal, through all kinds of racist problems. And so if someone is told that they're deviant and a criminal over and over again by the powers that be, then maybe they become criminal. They say, maybe that's what I am. Another one is called differential association theory. And what association theory argues is that if we begin to associate different things with normal versus deviant, then is in the mainstream of society, then we might no longer see it as problematic and criminal behavior. So, for example, um, when I was at this party with my friend I mentioned in the earlier video, something that had seemed very deviant to me at first, through association with it and seeing people actually doing this behavior, it became kind of less frightening. It seemed less deviant and more normalized to me. Similarly, if the role models growing up in your life did things like sell drugs or hustle on the side, um, then maybe you don't think that's so criminal because that's what a lot of people growing up did, and it seems normal to you. Um, or if everyone's in a gang, that doesn't seem like a deviant behavior. It seems like what everyone is doing. So again, here we're not associating particular behaviors with the idea of deviance. And that makes us maybe more likely to participate in such behaviors.